Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Point Podcast. Everybody had a great weekend. I know I did some great weather. I spent time with some friends and family. But as always, we're back here on a Monday to talk about the weekend that was in the world of sports and a lot happening. Obviously we got the Open Championship, which we'll dive into, the NBA Finals, which could be done as early as tomorrow. We have the NHL, which is in full bloom right now, where the Seattle expansion draft will be Wednesday night. That should be must-see TV to see where everyone's taken. We saw a flurry of trades over the weekend, mostly due to the protection lists, which we'll get into, where teams had to select 8 players that they were going to protect from the in the expansion draft, which would leave the entire rest of the roster available for Seattle to pluck from. And there were some interesting decisions. Obviously, we see some big names out there, none bigger than, the most important Montreal Canadian in the past decade plus. That would be their goaltender, Carey Price. He left himself exposed so that they could keep Jake Allen, so they have a 1-2 punch. Now I have my thoughts on why he did that, also why Montreal would accept it. But do they get away with this gamble? Does the Seattle Kraken take Carey Price? It's obviously an attractive thought. I mean, he is 34 years old. But what did Vegas do to start their franchise? They selected Marc-Andre Fleury, the Flower, who was playing much worse than Carey Price at this stage of his career. He turned into a couple of great seasons, including the last one where he won a Vezina Trophy. But there's also the thought, well, Carey Price may need off-season surgery. He's getting his hip looked at today in New York by a specialist. He's getting his knee looked at later in the week. So will he miss time next year? Could he miss potentially half the season, where Seattle would have him under contract for many more years? But your first year as a franchise, you want that figurehead. You want that brand name. And for Carey Price to not be your opening night starter, that would be a big blow. And I think it could affect them in the short term. Long-term thinking, I wouldn't want Carey Price because he's, again, goaltenders, the wear and tear. He's been injury prone the past couple of years. He obviously sat out a couple of seasons ago. That was more of a personal issue. But this year he was injured for most of the season. Obviously, we saw what he did in the playoffs, where he really was still showed himself to be the second best goaltender in the world behind Andrei Vasilevsky. But how much does he have left in the tank? How many guys are pushing through? And a lot there. And we'll get into that. But really what I'll talk about other players who are available and some interesting storylines around the league. But tonight, it's going to be a special podcast. Not this one here. I'm doing another one tonight. It's going to be the Seattle Expansion Draft Roundtable, where Casey Ward, frequent podcast guest, Dawson Warman, Seamus Fillmore, as you all know, my co-host on the Breaking Bad podcast every Tuesday, and myself will go through every NHL team, and we'll make our selection in the expansion draft, meaning we'll be Ottawa, we'll be the Toronto Maple Leafs, because somehow they're still the most interesting pick, whether it's Kerfoot or Dermott. And we'll select every team, every player that we would take if we were general manager Ron Francis. And I'm very much looking forward to this. I'm sure we'll have very different opinions, how we look at things, who you want to take, how many goalies you want to select. I think that's another really interesting angle to this. So that'll be this evening. We're going to do that at 8:00. So that'll be available on your podcast platforms, likely on Apple Podcast this evening, and then on Facebook and the other sections tomorrow morning. So that's going to be tonight. That should be a lot of fun. And, Seattle joining the league is interesting for sure because of things like this. You see trades over the weekend, like I said. And also, I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but I think the Seattle Kraken have a lot more pressure on them to be competitive, not only competitive, but to be a playoff team this year, whether it's warranted or not. The Vegas Golden Knights set a precedent that now every expansion franchise, you could argue in any sport, but we'll stick it to the NHL, has to follow. Now, getting to the Stanley Cup final is an unrealistic expectation. But do I think Seattle will have pressure to make the playoffs? Absolutely. You think of the ownership, Bill Foley, and what they did in Vegas. Not only do you make the Stanley Cup final, which is great for your franchise, but think of all the revenue they made in their first year. You go to the playoffs, that's so much extra ticket revenue that you're going to be bringing in. And you think of after a pandemic, people are horned up to do anything right now. And you're talking about Seattle in April. Who doesn't want to go see a game? You know, I want to go see a Seahawks game in Seattle. They're right on the top of my bucket list. I've never been to an NFL game, but the 12th man at CenturyLink Stadium is, you know, it's stuff of legends. If I'm in Seattle to watch a Seahawks game, you know, I get to go see a Kraken game at the same time. And I just think there's a lot of pressure on this team to be good. And that's why I think we'll see them take some players with a higher salary that maybe have a little bit of scare in them, but they want to sell this team as a winner. A guy like Carey Price, a guy like Vladimir Tarasenko. These guys all have. Tarasenko's an elite goal scorer. He's had, you know, shoulder surgeries out the wazoo, but what he has, the brand name, he has that. Well, he is a Stanley Cup champion, and he's a goal scorer, and he's a name you can put. It's an easier name to sell than just this guy who's traded this weekend. It comes to mind, Nolan Patrick or Phillip Myers. It's just easier to have a Vladimir Tarasenko. It's easier to have a Carey Price, potentially Matt Murray, if they go down that road with him being exposed in Ottawa, Ryan Getzlaf. So we'll see what Seattle does. I'm interested to see Wednesday night, but we'll go through our selections tonight and also talk about some other names that were really intriguing over the weekend, some trades that I liked from several teams and ones that were ultimately cap necessary, and some other trades I'm a little iffy on. Well, we're going to start today's podcast by talking about the Open Championship. And it's the final major of the year. Obviously, we have the Tokyo Olympics coming up, which are not off to the greatest start. Obviously, it hasn't commenced yet, but we see tons of positive COVID cases, and tennis star Coco Gauff tested positive, can't go. We're seeing some people positive tests in the Olympic Village. So, you know, should the games really be happening? Probably not, but of course they are. It's a television product. They couldn't play them last year. They're not canceling them again, and I don't blame them. If I'm NBC, if I'm Olympic athletes, I could give a shit about COVID. The thing about the Olympics, unless the sports that are, people will care about golf for 365. The fans that care about golf. People will care about basketball. They're still playing the NBA finals right now. They'll watch Team USA. People are invested in basketball year round. Same with you. I think you can make a strong argument that women's soccer is a sport that's highly regarded year round. Same with men's soccer, but I'm just saying, putting that into perspective. But when it comes to track and field and swimming and, you know, discus and things of that nature, people care about this for a 2-week period, and then they don't anymore. People can pretend like, oh, well, we're going to follow Penny Alexiak's career after people don't remember Penny Alexiak. They remember, okay, that's what she did for you. People aren't watching the world championships, including myself. And so you got to capitalize on what's in front of you. But what's a really good sell coming from the world of golf? Well, an Asian American who's now won the final major of the golf season just 5 days before the Olympics are set to begin. And that would be Collin Morikawa yesterday, who had just, you know, the age of 24, captured his second major in a calendar year, winning at the PGA last year and then winning the Open Championship this weekend. And what a show he put on yesterday, where it was just clutch from the beginning. He parred his first 6 holes, but he was in complete control, and that's when he just took over. Morikawa is a throwback in the sense that he is 111th in the whole entire PGA Tour in driving distance, meaning the DeChambos, the Koepkas, the Rory McIlroys, Xander Schauffele's, they're hitting the ball a lot farther than Collin Morikawa. But what does Collin Morikawa have? He's 6th on the PGA Tour in driving accuracy, meaning he's getting the ball on the green 6th best in the world. That's better than Dustin Johnson. That's better than Rory McIlroy. That's better than Jon Rahm. And by doing this, he also probably has the best approach shot in the game. We've seen him when he birdied 7, 8, 9 yesterday. He puts the ball in a perfect spot, and it's a great opportunity for birdie. He just didn't put himself in a position yesterday where he was in a lot of trouble. He made a key putt on 12 to save par. But other than that, he didn't have a scare. He came into the day, stroke behind Louis Oosthuizen, but he just kept his groove. He was playing with Louis throughout the day, but he just kept making putt after putt, and he shoots a 4 under on a Sunday at a major. And like I said, only 24 years old, but the calm, and he wasn't fazed by the nerves. He was just ready to play golf. And he's a mild-mannered guy. He's not DeChambeau or Koepka when it comes to this guy's going to promote our sport. But what he does have is he's a likable guy. See him after he wins, he's very humble, obviously very excited to win here. This was his first Open Championship ever, and he wins it at Royal St. George's. But he's good for the sport because he's, again, this is going to sound counterintuitive, and I mean this only in the positive sense. Collin is not just a white guy. And for a long time, including at the Open Championship, and there's still some courses in England where women or minorities could not go and play golf there. I know. At this very course, until 4 years ago, women could not play at it. The only reason women can play at this course is because the PGA Tour said, okay, you can keep women out, but you will not be holding any major events. And that they changed their stance pretty damn quick because of all the revenue, and we see the packed house this weekend. But Collin Morikawa is an Asian American, and he's just a really good story. You see, he's got that good strut. He's a great player. He's great for the tour. And again, I think seeing, when back in the day when Vijay Singh first broke through as an African-American golfer, it was really a big deal. Obviously, I was still in my youth, but just researching sports and being the historian that I try to be, he was such an outlier because, again, in some of those courses he was playing, patrons were like, what is a black man doing here? This is just so uncommon, including the United States. And he ended up winning a major. He was a multiple-time major champion. And to see guys like Morikawa, like Harold Varner III, like Vijay Singh, it's refreshing. And seeing a white guy win is not a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying. But having diversity in anything you do is going to make it a better sport. For the longest time, quarterbacks could only be white. They had to be 6'2", white quarterbacks that just stood in the pocket and threw the football. You look at the game now, other than Tom Brady, the best quarterbacks in the NFL are African-American. Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton. These guys are all, Mahomes, Jackson, and Newton are MVPs in the last 10 years. That's 3 African-American quarterbacks in the last 10 years. When Lamar Jackson was drafted, former NFL executive Bill Polian said on ESPN, Lamar Jackson won't be good enough to play quarterback. He's going to have to switch to wide receiver. Boy, does he look stupid now. But it's just breaking the barriers. And look at the rest of the leaderboard. Yeah, it was a bunch of white guys, but Morikawa's won 2 majors in the last calendar year. And there will continue to be, I'm a white guy, so I'm not rooting for or against anybody, but I do think it's good to see diversity come through. And at least, it doesn't have to be a minority to win every tournament, but to see different faces in anything is a good thing. It means there's progress. It means things are better than they once were. And I don't think if you're not a fan of that, then we have a bigger issue here. But when it comes to the weekend, Morikawa was strong from the beginning. Had a pretty, started 3 under the first day of the tournament, trailing by 3 strokes. Finished Friday, stroke back the lead. Entered Sunday, stroke back of Louis Oosthuizen again. But again, the same story for Louis Oosthuizen. He is now, this year, he's finished at the Masters. He finished tied for 3rd. At the PGA, tied for 2nd place. U.S. Open, 2nd place. And now at the British Open, or the Open Championship, 3rd place. And that is just so crushing for a guy that he doesn't play a lot of golf outside the majors. He does play in the European Tour, but he's only won 1 PGA Tour event, and that was back 11 years ago at the Open Championship. And a great golfer, a hard guy not to root for, because he's out there. He's not the biggest guy. He's small in stature. He's only 38 years old, yet you could tell anyone that he's 55, and I'm sure that they'd buy it. But just, it's again a day where he shoots plus 1, tough. He doesn't have that killer instinct on Sundays where it can get away from him. He only shot 1 over. We see a lot of the tee shots where he wasn't on the green. He had to scramble to make par. He didn't have a lot of great opportunities for birdies. On the 11th hole, he had some really bad luck. Perfect tee shot on a par 3. He ended up birdieing the hole, but he had an ace, but it hit the flagstick. And what they do in England is that the flagsticks are thicker than the United States. Steve Sands said on NBC, if it was an American flagstick, that's an ace. It would have put him at 13 under, a stroke back of Morikawa at the time. Who knows how that plays out? Instead, he birdies, then he kind of has another tough shot, drops another stroke, and the rest is history. But it's just the breaks in sports sometimes, and more often than not, he's not getting them later on in the tournament. We see him shoot a 64 on the first day and really have the confidence, but it doesn't translate into his weekends, because throughout the weekend he shot a combined even par for the weekend, shoots -1, then +1 on Saturday and Sunday at the Open Championship. And that's not good enough to win. There's too many good players out there. And unfortunately for him, he didn't get the result. Jordan Spieth ended up finishing 2nd. He shoots 13 under. He shoots 4 under for the day. He's the confident guy. It's good to see Jordan Spieth have that confidence again. For the longest time, since his meltdown at Augusta, he's been a mess. And he's not all the way back yet, because he has not won a major. But yesterday he played good enough to win. Morikawa was just out of this world, where Spieth shoots 400 yesterday, just the same as Morikawa. But Collin he had a few strokes ahead of him, and we saw Spieth bogey a few holes that he shouldn't have. But he played fantastic. He had a great tournament. He had a better start than Morikawa. He's a stroke off the lead after the first day. But again, an okay Saturday kind of threw a wrench into his plans. But he did play well enough to win. He said that after the match, or after his round yesterday. And I completely agree with him. Collin just had one of those weekends where it was meant to be for him. And Jordan just kind of played through it, stayed in contention the whole day. He wasn't like Louis Oosthuizen, where he shoots 1 over. He shoots 4 under, kept the pressure on Morikawa. But it seemed like every hole that Jordan would get within a stroke, Morikawa would answer with another birdie. On 9, Jordan's in the group ahead of Collin Morikawa. He birdies a beautiful birdie putt on 9. What does Morikawa do? 10 minutes later, he birdies 9. Spieth birdies 10. So does Morikawa. And it was like that the whole day, where I'm sure he saw the score. He goes, I think I'm getting closer. I'm getting momentum. But then, I look and I'm in the hole again by 2 strokes. And it's a tough position for Jordan, but I think he can build off this. He's a guy that when he gets hot, he really can catch fire. And we'll see what this translates into. But I think he'll play well. Also, we have the Olympics. We don't have another major until April, which is a long time, but he could have a great end to the year, potentially win the FedEx Cup standings, win the $10 million prize at the end of the year, and carry that momentum into next season, where he's won majors before. He's been a factor at major tournaments. So we'll see what he can do moving forward. But good tournament for him. Easily could have won it, but it just wasn't in the cards for him this week, where a better player just was on the horizon and did more damage than he did. We see in the tournament, Jon Rahm, he shoots 11 under par, 4 under on Sunday. It was just a little too far behind again, meeting a better player. But what it did show me is that he wins at the US Open less than a month ago. He comes back and finishes tied for 3rd at the very next major. He's not going to have to wait long to win another one. I think Jon Rahm will win his second major next season. Morikawa did not go through this whole season without winning a second one. I don't think Jon Rahm will either. He will win a major next year. He's that good of a golfer, where he's improved his driving. He's not the guy who's angry all the time anymore. He's not. He uses his fuel. He uses his anger sometimes as motivation. It used to set him off, where he would get so frustrated and it would ruin his round. That's no longer the case. He's a guy that's composed. He uses his emotion when he makes great birdie putts. But US, he can win any major. Augusta would be the one I would favor him the least. But I think next year, Jon Rahm will win his second major. I think if he's not the best player in the world, he's right there. According to rankings, Dustin Johnson is, but Dustin Johnson's been having a terrible season. And I don't know how he's still ranked number 1 in the world after his performances lately. But between Rahm, I look at Brooks Koepka. I think those 2 guys are the most consistent in the world when it comes to being in contention at big tournaments. And I think for Rahm, I expect to see him raising another trophy next year, because if he doesn't, I think that's a tough season for him. You want to have another major under your belt. It's not easy, but looking at the field and looking at his skills, he's just as good as anyone right now. And I think he will succeed and have another major under his belt in the not too distant future. Canadian content. It was a mixed, tough Sunday for Corey Connors, who shot 3 over. He tied for 15th. Mackenzie Hughes, after being in the final group at the US Open, shot 1 under. He finishes with a -8 score, tied with Brooks Koepka. So we actually had a pretty good. He finishes in the top 10. So he will be back next year, guaranteed. So he had a mixed bag at the majors, missing out in the first 2 cuts of the year, then being in contention on Sunday at the final 2. So progress for him. He's 30. He's going to be 31. So he's not old by any means, and he seems to only be getting better. He's had a tough season, but the last 2 majors, we've seen progress. And for a long time, I thought, well, if Canada's going to have a major champion, it's going to be Corey Connors. I'm not so sure of that anymore. I think Mac is a better driver. I think he's a clutch putter when he needs to be. And what'll be the really big test, obviously you don't win a major, so that's washed from this season. But when both guys are going, they're heading to Tokyo. They're representing Canada at the Olympics, and we'll see what they can do. I think, like anything, the U.S. will be favorites. But these 2 are closer than any of whoever the U.S. sends. They're going to be closer because, we see the United States at the Ryder Cup. They are not close. They don't play well together as a team. These two are friends. They are both countrymen of Canada. There's just more of a unified front there. And I'm excited to see what these two can do. It's a massive opportunity. And we see, the men's basketball team, they couldn't qualify for the Olympics. That's a big disappointment. But could these two golfers strike, get some magic here and go have a great couple weeks and at least come home with a medal? That would be a huge accomplishment. And, a career defining one for both these guys where, maybe they both never win a major title, but you win Olympic gold. That's something you can carry for the rest of your career, and it'll establish them as two of the legends of the sport. I don't think it would put them on the platform with Mike Weir, because winning the Masters is different. I think it's, winning a Stanley Cup is more impressive to me than winning an Olympic gold medal. When Sidney Crosby's career is over, the first thing out of it, people say is not going to be, well, he won 2 Olympic gold medals. No, it'll be, he's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. That's just how this works. But I do think for these two guys to say, well, we won gold, it puts them in a conversation with Mike Weir. I think it's a different one, but ultimately it gets you some, you still get talked about, and it gets you some credibility at least down the line. So congratulations to Collin Morikawa. Great tournament for him. And we'll see how it goes at the Olympics. He'll be heading over there for the United States and competing against, Corey Connors and Matt Hughes. So great opportunity for all these guys, but Morikawa's second major at the age of 24, something really to be something special and, something really to be proud of. Pivoting to the NHL. Mentioned the expansion draft off the top, and obviously that's a big point of contention here, where teams are going to be selecting players, and it's not only about that. It's about, some teams that are in salary cap hell, where they've had to dump contracts over the last, because for the next 4 days there's no trade period until after the draft, which is on Friday. So we'll see what transpires, but teams have been offloading contracts because they know they're not going to be able to re-sign them, and it gets a player off their list of protection as well. We saw that in with the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they traded Barclay Goodrow. Barclay Goodrow is a guy they would love to keep, but they do not have the salary cap room where he's going to be looking for a raise. He's got traded a year and a half ago for a first-round pick, which people thought was crazy at the time. Turned out to be brilliant, where he was on a third line with Yanni Gourde and Blake Coleman, instrumental to them winning back-to-back Stanley Cups. But they couldn't keep him. The Rangers are a team that's on the rise. They see themselves as a team that could be at least in the playoff discussion next season. They scoop up Barclay Goodrow, and now they have a few days of just the ability to talk to him one-on-one and for him to sign a contract with the Rangers before other teams can chat with him and get to free agency where he's free to sign elsewhere. So we see that move. We see the Colorado Avalanche, where they decided to trade Windsor, Nova Scotia native Ryan Graves to the New Jersey Devils, where they love Ryan Graves. And he's developed into a great defenseman in Colorado, but they have to offload him for a second rounder because they can't protect him. They have too many guys that they needed to protect. They decided to keep Sammy Girard instead of Graves, which I think could be a massive mistake. Girard's got more offensive upside, but he's also got more weaknesses in his defensive game. As we saw in the playoffs, he was basically unplayable against the Vegas Golden Knights, where he's a small man to begin with, and you saw guys like Mark Stone, Pacioretty, guys with big frames, manhandle him. And at that time of the year, he just was not an effective player. And tough for the Colorado. They're in a jam right now because they lose Ryan Graves, who's a key part of their team. They might be losing their captain, Gabriel Landeskog, because free agency's coming around the corner, and they haven't been able to sign him to an extension. They want to have him back. Don't get me wrong, but they can't agree on terms. And if he gets free agency, there will be there'll be plenty of suitors. I think 2 teams in Canada that I think really should take a look at him are the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens. Montreal, I think that would be a splash signing, but he's a guy that would provide leadership. You're losing Shea Weber likely for next season. Gabriel Landeskog helps their forward group, which struggles to score goals. And he's been in a winning program, brings that over to you. And that would hurt Colorado a lot. Also, Colorado, their number one goaltender, Vezina nominee last year, Philip Grubauer, is an unrestricted free agent. And they haven't been able to sign him yet. So potentially losing your captain, your top line left winger, and then your starting goaltender, and also a top four defenseman. That's a nightmare for a team that last year was such a disappointment for them. I think they should have went to the Stanley Cup final. They're out in the second round of Vegas, and now you have the potential of losing three big pieces of the team that got you that far and you think can potentially lead you into the future. But this is what happens with the salary cap. This is what's happening with the expansion draft. You're going to lose really good talent. And another thing I think that is hurting the Colorado Avalanche is their salary cap structure. Now, what they're doing is good. It's not the Toronto Maple Leaf model where you just give the players whatever money they want. And you don't fight them on it. Some people might say it's a shot. I think that's just the truth. But Colorado signed Nathan MacKinnon for $6.6 million for 6 years. And he, at the time, he probably took less money than he deserved, but he was not the elite player that he was. He had a great Calder season. Second season, he was okay. That third season, it was kind of a disaster for Nathan. And he got a longer-term bridge deal. I think he wanted that stability, and he loves Colorado, but also his play wasn't that great, and take the money that you can get. But now that he's the second best player in the world, you could argue, he's regular season, he's very much an underpaid player. And I think for Joe Sakic, he set his salary cap where he's only willing to pay Rantanen, who signed a bridge, Landeskog, those other great players on the team, to $7 million a year contracts. Because McKinnon's getting paid 6.6. He's better than Mikko Rantanen. He's better than Gabriel Landeskog. You cannot have Gabriel Landeskog making $9 million. That's just a dollar figure, an amount for me. I wouldn't be surprised if he's asking for that. I don't be surprised if he's asking for 8. I don't think you can pay a guy $1.5 million more than your best player. And that might sound crazy, but look at Boston. Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak make less money than David Krejci. His contract just ended, but he was the highest paid player for the last 2 years. Is he the best player on the team? No. But they set their precedent, and it's helped them. But I think for Landeskog, this is his last kick at the can. For Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, he wanted a longer-term deal. So to me, the question is Gabriel Landeskog getting offered 8 years? He's the captain of the team. I can't see McKinnon not wanting him back. They have great chemistry together. So what's the holdup here? And if it is a money issue, I get it from Joe Sakic to play hardball because I just can't. It hurts McKinnon. As much as this sounds stupid, Landeskog making $1.5 million to $2 million more than McKinnon, it hurts the league in a sense because you're seeing one of the top stars make that little of money, and it's like belittling him. He's got a number of years left, and I'm sure he's fine with it ego-wise. Money is not his motivation. It's about winning a Stanley Cup. That's clear. But it's in the mind of management saying, can we have our best player making this? We can't have our third best forward make this. They're also going to run into this problem with Cale Makar, who just got nominated for a Norris. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins it next year. What do you pay him? Again, McKinnon's at 6.6. Can you sign him to a bridge? I think this is the holdup. Maybe we'll see Landeskog signs for 8.5, and I'm proven wrong. But I think the salary structure of Nathan McKinnon's contract is truly holding up this Landeskog deal because he's a great player, but he's a good player, but he's not a superstar. And you can't let your good player, your third best forward, make more money than your superstar, than the guy that's the face of your franchise. And we'll see what comes around. But if he gets free agency, he will be arguably the best forward available. He's more valuable right now than Taylor Hall. Not even close. Taylor Hall had a good little run in Boston, pretty damn quiet in the second round, but he had a good little run. It rejuvenated his career. I think he'll stick in Boston. I'm not paying him more than $5 million because I haven't seen enough to. He was a disaster last year in Buffalo, and then you have a good 2-3 week span, and then that makes you a $6-7 million player. Not to me. If Don Sweeney wants to give him that kind of money, buyer beware. But Landeskog's more valuable than him. Zach Hyman, I love Zach Hyman. People have been talking about him a lot. The guy's not worth more than $4.5 million. Period. He will make more than that. But to me, you're 30, you're injury prone, you've got a lot of wear and tear on those tires, and you're not a great skater right now. In 5 years, it's going to be bad. It's going to be it could be a long-term IR situation where you're just not playing anymore and you're not making $6 million if I'm a general manager. So to me, those are just a few names that come to mind. Landeskog would be the most valuable forward, one of the most valuable players on the market. Now, it's been reported that Grubauer wants $6 million a year. I'm not giving him $6 million a year. Yes, he was nominated for a Vezina last year. The year before, he was injured throughout the whole playoffs. They had to start Michael Hutchinson. Again, they lose in Game 7 of the second round. That's a crushing loss. So what happens now? And where do you go from here? And I just see it as a tough go here for the Colorado Avalanche, where they got a lot of players to sign, and I think they have a set budget, and Joe Sakic and ownership are unwilling to go past it. And I can't say I truly blame them, but by doing that, it was going to hurt their team in the long run, where they're going to have to fill holes. And I'm sure a guy like Nathan McKinnon is not going to be happy saying, okay, I'm making 6.6. Why is our team worse on paper now, where we could be in the same position as an Edmonton, as a Toronto, where their superstars are making double my salary, and yet, they've lost less talent than I have. So interesting in Colorado to see what they do and what shakes out with guys like Grubauer, guys like Gabriel Landeskog. Also in the weekend, we saw a big trade between the Nashville Predators and the Philadelphia Flyers. And that was Nashville trading Ryan Ellis, longtime defenseman, great player, to Philly, for New Brunswick defenseman Phillip Myers and former second overall pick Nolan Patrick. And Philly, I like Ryan Ellis a lot. I still think he has a lot of game. Let's just be honest. Last year was a disaster of a year for the Philadelphia Flyers. It truly was. They had aspirations of going deep in the playoffs, likely winning a Stanley Cup. They don't even come close to making the playoffs. And you look at guys like Carter Hart, like Claude Giroux, Jake Voracek, Travis Konechny. Guys just didn't deliver last year. There's guys who were supposed to, just didn't. And that the whole team stunk. Phillip Myers, it was said after the year he's had some injuries and things like that, but from jump last year, it was not his best year. Him and Sanheim did not have the connection that they did the year before. You saw the team really miss the presence of Matt Niskanen, the veteran defenseman. And I'm sure this was Philly saying, Ryan Ellis still has game. This guy's a top 4 defenseman. He's had some injury woes, as has Phillip Myers, but he's a better player right now than Phil is. I think Phil has a lot of potential. I think he can be a really good defenseman in this league. But definitively that that Ryan Ellis is a top 3 defenseman. He was a top 3 defenseman in Nashville, where they were stockpiled with D-men and really good ones. Over the course of their franchise for the last 10 years, you had Shea Weber, you had Ryan Suter, you had Seth Jones, you had Matthias Ekholm, you had Roman Josi. Ryan Ellis was always a fixture. a guy who is a small defenseman. People never thought he'd make the NHL, yet he's grinded his way, been a great World Junior player for Team Canada, and he's emerged as a really great player. Now, his salary and his contract could be something that Nashville wanted to get rid of. They don't have to retain any salary, and Nashville's moving in the opposite direction. They make the playoffs last year, but they need to rebuild. Pekka Rinne just retired after 15 years in the NHL, one of the best Nashville Predators of all time, if not the best. You have Jussi Saros, who had a good season last year, but is he your number one goaltender? Can he do it long term? That's a big question. You got Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, who are both making $8 million a year for at least another 5 each, who are pretty terrible at this point of their career. And they're both exposed, and we'll see if any of us take them in the expansion draft that we do tonight. But you got to hope that they can go. It frees up some cap room for your team. But those are both dead weight contracts. And you say we need some more forward help. They traded Victor Arvidsson. They're moving on from guys that they had before. When they got to their cup final, Arvidsson was a key fixture in that. So was Ryan Ellis. So was Pekka Rinne. All those 3 guys are gone. It's a youth movement where they're hoping the likes of Dante Fabro, where Eli Tolvanen, these guys can step in and create a new culture and rebound in a couple years and be a competitive team again. And, you had Phil, he goes on your back end. I mentioned Fabro. You still have Yossi. You still have Matthias Ekholm. So you still have a very strong top 4. Phil is going to be looking for a bounce back year, a new locale. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a great season in Nashville, where, it could have been just getting stale in Philly. Him and Sanheim didn't have the greatest connection his entire time there. And, he gets a new voice, a new coach, and John Hines to see where he can go get a little bit more opportunity on the power play consistently, potentially in that second unit after Roman Yossi. He's not going to be getting any power play time over him. But they could go with 2D as well. I hate that. If I was ever a coach, probably will never be, because they wouldn't want me to, but there would never be 2 defensemen on the ice on a power play. Me and my dad constantly bicker about that, but forwards are better offensive players than defensemen. Period. And I don't need 2D you already have one. More often than not in the power play, the defenseman's going to pass the puck. That's just instinct. You watch some hockey games. The guy in the back end who's in the middle of the slot, it's always a defenseman. It could be Yossi, could be Dougie Hamilton, could be PK Subban when he was an elite player. They always seem to pass the puck. They have the puck in the slot. They could throw a wrister through. There's traffic in front. They pass it to the Kucherov, to the Stamkos that's on the wing. You don't need 2 defensemen that are going to do the same thing. Put another elite scorer on the power play. He can score some goals. Philip Forsberg, I think Tolvanen could be that guy, their future power play star. He's a young Russian winger. We'll see what he can do. But they got to look towards that. And, they get Nolan Patrick in the deal, who's had a tough career so far. If you don't know about Nolan Patrick, he's a former Brandon Wheat King, went 2nd overall in the NHL draft to Philly in the Nico Hischier draft. But he's had inconsistency and injury-plagued career where he missed most of the last year and a half due to concussion issues. Did play at the end of the year last year, but he's hasn't even proven that he's an NHL player at this point. He made the NHL his first year. You could say more because of his status. You're drafted 2nd overall. You're not sending the 2nd overall pick back to Brandon. And has a concussion that year. In his sophomore year, has a big one. Like I said, missed almost a year and a half where he had to rehab, try to get back. And acquiring Nolan Patrick is a scary thought, because you're thinking, well, what are we getting here? Can he play night in, night out? And clearly Nashville had other plans, because after acquiring Nolan Patrick, they flipped him to the Vegas Golden Knights for their first draft pick in franchise history, Cody Glass. And Glass was a guy that they hoped was going to be a star. There's a guy that's going to mature, develop into a guy that's going to be the future of their franchise. Cody Glass made, and the prospect of him, made Nick Suzuki expendable and let them go out and acquire Max Pacioretty. But Glass has not developed. He's not been that effective at the AHL level. And you're basically trading two guys who have not proven anything yet. Glass especially has not proven himself as an NHL player. Patrick has more, like I said, more of necessity and more out of status. But now you have Patrick who goes to Vegas, who will likely be on that third line role. They are looking for center ice. Last year, Chandler Stevenson was their number one center. It clearly was their biggest weakness in the playoffs. Montreal, were they best at scoring goals? But they had Deneau, they had Suzuki, they had Kokiniemi, they had Jake Evans or Yoel Armia playing center, or Eric Stahl. They had more center depth than Vegas. It was Stevenson, then it was William Karlsson, Alex Tuck. They had some injuries, so they play him at center. Nick Waugh. It just wasn't enough. And Patrick is unproven, but again, it's a low cap number. Vegas is strapped against the cap. I know they're a team that's inquiring about Jack Eichel. I don't know how they pull that off, but so far you're thinking, well, how do they pull this deal off? Patches. How did they get Alex Pietrangelo this young into a franchise? So I'm sure if they can find a way, they will do it. But we'll see if that materializes. But Patrick is a reclamation project of sorts, and they'll be looking to see if they can get any more juice out of that fruit down the line here. But Nashville takes on Glass, hoping to find something and kind of resurrect his career and see if he can be a full-time pro. Then you get Vegas, who gets Nolan Patrick, to see what they can do with him. The Dallas Stars also over the weekend made some interesting moves. They first flipped Jason Dickinson to the Vancouver Canucks for a third-round pick. This was more about the expansion draft where they had to protect players. Dickinson has emerged as a really strong third-line checking line center over the past number of years, something Vancouver could really use, get some of that defensive burden off Bo Horvat. And Dickinson only had 16 points in 51 games last year. But I do think he has more offense there. He's a guy that checks very well. He's a guy that can get on your nerves. And he's just a solid player. And like I said, he's better than a Tim Schaller. He's better than a Jay Beagle, than Antoine Roussel. He's clearly a checking line guy. He can play the penalty kill. And he's also got playoff experience, which this team needs as well when it comes to just, he went to a Stanley Cup final. He did all of that. So there was that. Then their big news was re-signing superstar defenseman Miro Heiskanen to an 8-year, $67.6 million contract. That's $8.45 million a year. And Heiskanen, I believe, is as talented, as good as the Cale Makars, as the Adam Foxes. I think Hedman and Seth Jones are in a class above all those players, including Makar and whoever else, you name them. But Heiskanen is right there in the younger defenseman category where you're saying, well, who's next? Who could be the next dominant player for another 10 years? I think Seth Jones is still very young, but you got Hedman who's still top of his game, but he's won back-to-back cups. He's got a torn meniscus. How long can he keep this up? I think Heiskanen can be the best defenseman in the world. I think he's that good. You've seen Dallas when they went to the Stanley Cup final. Klingberg was the guy they thought forever would be the glue really to that defense core, be the best defenseman on the team. It wasn't him. It was Miro Heiskanen who stepped up, who played fantastic. And he's a great skater. He's got great vision. He can play the power play. He can go end to end with the puck. And I just love him as a player. Again, Dallas is probably not a team you watch a ton of, but he's a game changer. He's a guy that I think he's the best player on their team right now. He's better than Seguin. He's better than Jamie Benn at this point. He's better than Jason Robertson. He's pivotal. And when you have a number one defenseman in your mix, you need to keep them. And they do that. There's only so many number one defensemen. It's one thing I argue with people all the time when they tell me, well, this guy's a number one defenseman. No, he isn't. There's only so many. It's just like the superstar conversation. Not every team has a superstar. Not every team has multiple. Right now, the Chicago Blackhawks have one superstar. That's Patrick Kane. I love Jonathan Toews, but he's not a superstar anymore. He was, not anymore. Pittsburgh Penguins have one superstar. That's Sidney Crosby. Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang are not superstars anymore. It's not me being critical. It's just watching the game and looking at it. John Klingberg is not a superstar defenseman. Miro Heiskanen is. Cale Makar is a superstar defenseman. You look around the league. Darnell Nurse is not a superstar defenseman yet. Could he be? Absolutely. But he's had 1 year where he was a dominant force. And I love Darnell Nurse because he brings so much to the table. But it has to be more than 1 year. In sports now, it's, okay, show us for 6 months and then you're here to stay. That's not how I look at things. For a year, Morgan Rielly was nominated for the Norris Trophy. Is he a number one defenseman? No. You can win a Stanley Cup without a number one defenseman. It's rare. Pittsburgh did it 2016. Carolina did it 2006. But you look at the years. Let's just go through it. 2010, Chicago, Duncan Keith. Yep. Superstar defenseman. Boston 2011, Zdeno Chara. Yep. Check. 2012, LA Kings, Drew Doughty. Stanley Cup? I'd say so. 2013, Duncan Keith. 2014, Drew Doughty. 2015, Duncan Keith. Aforementioned 2016, Chris Letang was hurt. Even though I think Brian Dumoulin's a better defenseman than Chris Letang, year in, year out, we'll play the game. 2017, Pittsburgh, Chris Letang. 2018, Washington, John Carlson. If he isn't, he's damn close. You know, he's really, really good. I think he should have won the Norris Trophy over Roman Josi a few years back. But in those playoffs, he was a dominant player, and I would give him that credence. You know, at least being, if not a superstar, I'd give him a number one defenseman role. So yes, 2019, Alex Pietrangelo, you bet. 20, it can go on and on. And then 20 and 2021, you have Victor Hedman. But that's 10 years. That's over 10 years where I named one team that did not have a number one defenseman that won a Stanley Cup. Dallas, in the last 2 years, went to a Stanley Cup final with, aforementioned, Miro Heiskanen, a number one defenseman on the roster. It's just a pattern. Shea Weber's injured, but he was a number one defenseman in these playoffs. To me, it's so important to have a number one defenseman because it eases the load on everybody else in your team. And are there teams that win without a number one center win a cup? Yes, but they're rare. You look at any sport, to win without key positions, the amount of teams that win a Super Bowl without an elite quarterback are few and far between. The Trent Dilfers are the outliers. The Tom Bradys are not. And I see the same thing here in the NHL, where the Miro Heiskanens, the Cale Makars, the Victor Hedmans, the Seth Jones, they're invaluable because they make everybody's lives easier, and that includes the general manager, head coach, you name it, season ticket holder, because of what they bring game in, game out, and how they ease the load on everybody else and make people's lives easier. And Dallas saw that. They said, Miro is a superstar. Miro is the future of this league, where you can play offensive hockey and still get back and play transitionally. He's a good, solid defense. He's a good defenseman, not just scoring. He's not Erik Karlsson, whose defensive game stunk even when he was at the top of his game. Now you can get caught paying number one defensemen who turn into busts. Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, they can kill you. But looking at history and looking at what he's done so far in his career, this was a really good contract. And I think for Dallas, this was a really smart move. You keep your guy, you pay him a good salary. They're kind of in this weird phase where Sagan was out all of last year. Ben Bishop, they left him exposed in the expansion draft. Is Hudobin the number one goaltender? I don't think so. He did a really good run. But what do they do up front? It looks like Jason Robertson's going to be a really good player. Can he build off his great start to his career? And we'll go from there. But to have a building block like Miro Heiskanen in place already so you can build your forward group and keep that going is fantastic. So as we're talking about the expansion draft and different moves, it just being reported that Seattle Kraken may be making their first signing sooner rather than later, as Elliot Friedman is reporting that they are closing in on a 3-year, $10.5 million contract with unrestricted free agent goalie Chris Driedger, who was formerly of the Florida Panthers last year, had a career year where he played a lot of games down the stretch where Sergei Bobrovsky was struggling. So that's 3 times $3.5 million. He good contract for him, good backup goalie for Seattle, or he could be a tandem guy. Making $3.5 million is a lot for a backup goaltender. So I wouldn't read in too much about what Seattle does when it comes to selecting Carey Price with the signing, because I think they're going to have a lot of goalies. I think they at least take 4 to 5 in the expansion draft for a number of reasons, because you want to take as many goalies as you can because they are at such a premium right now. Teams need goaltending. You think of teams around the NHL. Colorado may need a goaltender. I just mentioned Dallas would love to get rid of Ben Bishop. They need a goalie. Toronto needs another goalie to play with Jack Campbell. The Edmonton Oilers need a goaltender to play with Mike Smith. The Calgary Flames could use one. Minnesota, if they lose Kaapo Kähkönen in the expansion draft, they're going to need somebody to back up Cam Talbot. Those are just a few teams that come to the top of my mind that are going to need goaltending help. There will be more. Last year, there's more goalie movement in free agency than the history of the league. So goalies are at a premium. There's only so many good ones in the league right now. And teams are going to take flyers on a guy they don't necessarily trust. I think Driedger's a guy that they really feel good about. But, good for Chris Driedger. He's 27, a journeyman. He came off a 2-year, $1.7 million deal. So huge raise for him. And he worked his ass off to get to this point. And to start on a new franchise, I think that's really good for him. Congrats to Chris Driedger. Great season last year where he pushed Sergei Bobrovsky, and he really was the better goalie for much of the year. But the Kraken are kind of on the board. They make their first signing. They get Driedger. Like I said, I think we'll talk about it tonight, but I think they will take many more goalies in this expansion draft. And what do they do with Carey Price? What do they do with Tarasenko? Does a guy like Ryan Getzlaf, is he an interesting target for them? Could they bring in a veteran like him to be the first captain of this franchise? We'll dive into all that tonight, which should be a lot of fun. But yeah, that'll be tonight, 8:00, the expansion draft roundtable with Casey Ward, Dawson Warman, Seamus Fulmer, and myself, where we go through all 31 teams and we make a selection and build the Seattle Kraken roster in its early stages here prior to free agency, which kicks off next week. So thanks for joining me today. We'll be breaking down much more as we go along here, but fun show today. As always, stay safe, take care out there, and we'll see you later tonight. Have a great one.